Ready to shine inside out? Welcome to Polished Beauty Podcast, where ambition meets empowerment. We talk business, beauty, brain, body. I am your host, Dr. Daisy Ayim, triple board certified cosmetic surgeon and OBGYN. Let's get polished.
Today, the topic is one that many of us experience, but just rarely talk about: high-functioning depression. You know the feeling, you're juggling a successful career, social life, responsibilities, yet something feels off. You're exhausted, emotionally drained, maybe even just disconnected. But on the outside, you look like you have it all together. Well, our guest today has put a name to the silent struggle and is giving people the tools to reclaim their joy. She's a board-certified psychiatrist, researcher, and award-winning mental health advocate. Her book, High Functioning: Overcome Your Hidden Depression and Reclaim Your Joy, hit shelves April 8th, and it's already making waves. Welcoming now to the show is the incredible Dr. Judith Joseph. Welcome, superstar.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Dr. Daisy, so excited to have you back on.
Of course. Welcome, Dr. Judith. I can't wait to hear so much about this book.
It's nice to meet you both.
This is a hard topic for many, but let's talk about the glorification of overwork. Hustle culture trains us to believe that exhaustion is the price of success. And because of that, so many people overlook their mental health struggles. Nearly 1 in 10 adults in the US experience depression, maybe even more, but many just don't seek treatment because they don't recognize their symptoms as depression. They chalk it up to stress, burnout, or just pushing through. So let's start with the basics. How do we differentiate between regular stress and what you define as high functioning depression? And why do so many high achievers fall into this category?
That's a great question. Stress is actually part of the typical human experience. We need stress. Without stress, healthy stress, we wouldn't get up in the morning, we wouldn't go to work, we wouldn't do things that we need to do to survive. However, unhealthy stress is when the worrying and the pressures of life start to wear and tear on our mind, on our body, on our quality of life. So when healthy stress crosses over to unhealthy stress, that could lead to things like depression, anxiety, burnout, substance abuse. But high functioning depression is different than typical depression because in high functioning people, they have all of the symptoms of depression. But instead of breaking down or exhibiting significant distress, they actually overfunction. They cope by busying themselves. So when they're sitting still, they feel restless. When they're not busy, they feel empty. And they don't know what this unpleasant feeling is, which is anhedonia. So they just keep moving and being busy. And before you know it, you're a human doing, not a human being.
Wow. That distinction right there is so crucial, because that between burnout and high functioning depression, that's so critical. We've all been conditioned to believe that exhaustion is just the price of ambition. But what you're saying is that it's actually a warning sign that something deeper, much deeper is going on. And that's a total paradigm shift. And I love that you're addressing this in a way that makes mental health more nuanced. It's not black or white. It's about recognizing the gray areas where we can make changes before things escalate. So brava to you.
Well, burnout wasn't added into the diagnostic manual only until recently, right? It only got added about 10, 15 years ago. But none of us would ever say, oh, it didn't exist before you put it in the coding book, right? We knew it always existed, but people weren't recognizing it. And burnout, by definition, is an occupational hazard. So the situation at work, the work environment, that's causing the overwhelm, the lack of concentration, the irritability, the exhaustion. But technically, if it's true burnout, once you leave that environment, you should feel better, right? You should be refreshed. You should be restored and made whole. The difference between burnout and high functioning depression is that when you remove the person who has high functioning depression out of the work situation, they still can't be still. They still find other things to do. They'll busy themselves with their church. They'll busy themselves with their kids. They'll take on all these responsibilities or start a side hustle. They just can't sit still. They have this inner restlessness. And a lot of them experience something called anhedonia, which is a lack of pleasure and interest in things. So, for example, if you used to really enjoy your favorite food, let's say sushi, and you're eating sushi and you're like, you just eat it just to survive. Or you used to really enjoy your favorite music, your song, You used to dance to it, but now you're like, uh-huh, it's all right. That's anhedonia. And it is the silent red flag that you may have high functioning depression and you don't realize it. Because most people, when they think depression, they think crying, not getting out of bed. They're not thinking busy, productive person who walks around feeling dull or mute. They say, oh, that's not a problem. The only people who are really issues are people we have to take care of who are in crisis. But we're missing the majority of us who have
Yeah.
symptoms of depression.
Yeah.
If we wait for us to break down, then we're missing out on a whole host of people that we could potentially prevent a breakdown in.
So your book introduces the 5 V's, which I love: validation, venting, values, vitals, and vision. Which one do people struggle with the most, and how can they start implementing it today to improve?
Dr. Daisy, I think that validation is the hardest, the most difficult one for people who are high functioning. Why? You know, I spoke at a conference recently with all these high powered women, and women who have it all. And I asked these women who have it all, how many of you have sat through meetings and you really had to pee, but you didn't? And they all started laughing. There was not one person in that room who didn't do that, right? Because why? They invalidate their bodies all the time. You know, how many of us have been sitting at a desk and our neck hurts and our wrist hurts, but we keep typing away, or our eyes really hurt and we don't want to be on that meeting, but we still press it, right? We invalidate how we feel all the time. So validation tends to be the hardest one. And it's because a lot of people with high functioning depression have learned early in their lives to just push down how they're feeling and not accept and acknowledge how they feel, to just get through, to just continue being pathologically productive. So I spend a lot of time helping people with validation. And I liken it to, what if you're in this room and you hear a big crash, right? And you're looking around, but it's dark. There's no one had turned the lights on. You're just, some people will go running, some people will start swinging. You turn the light on and you see, oh, that was just a vase that fell. You're like, oh, I feel better. When we identify our feelings and accept our feelings, it's like turning the light on and it's like feeling better and feeling less stressed, because humans don't like uncertainty. So if we can pinpoint how we feel and accept how we feel, that act is therapeutic and anti-anxiety provoking in itself.
Wow.
Wow.
Some thought-provoking answers there.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Judith, we've all heard the phrase listen to your body. But what I love about your work is that you take it a step further, helping people listen to their emotions too. That's, for me, that's everything. You talk about the 6 vitals: the work-life balance, the sleep, relationship, diet, movement, and technology use. Now, let's be honest, half of us are guilty of doom scrolling at 2 and 3 a.m. when we should be sleeping. And that brings me to my next question. What are some of the biggest warning signs that our vitals are off? And what's one small but powerful change we can make today to start reclaiming our joy?
Well, the vitals that most doctors will tell you to look out for, and Dr. Daisy will agree, are getting good movement, getting, good nutrition, less inflammatory foods, less artificial foods, getting good sleep. But there are 3 vital signs that most healthcare providers neglect, and I'm going to teach you how to identify them. The first is the quality of your relationships. The longevity science these days says that the quality of your relationships is the number one predictor of your longevity. That means if you're with someone toxic or in a toxic relationship, they are literally draining your life force. So think about that. Number 2 is your relationship with technology. I truly believe that in the future, there's going to be a whole category of conditions in mental health dedicated to how technology impacts our brain. They're already studying it. At Stanford, they have an entire Zoom fatigue center where that's all they study, how like looking at yourself during a Zoom meeting, how unnatural it is. When you talk to someone in real life, you don't see what you look like. There's something very unnatural about it.
Yeah.
And doom scrolling, that's being studied because what we found is that doom scrolling is higher in women and it's higher in people who survived trauma. And if you think about it, one of the unknown trauma responses that most people don't know, people think flashback nightmares, but one of the unknown symptoms is trying to control outcomes. So what you do is you put yourself in a situation where you're basically being re-traumatized to kind of control the outcome to see if you can make a difference. So when we watch things online and we're putting ourselves back into these painful situations where we're getting exposure to traumas because we're looking at all these negative things, it's our brain's way of trying to control an outcome. So it's a trauma response. And if we knew that, then we would limit our exposure to things that are traumatizing, right? But it becomes a vicious cycle. And the third uncommon vital sign is work-life boundaries. You know, people with high functioning depression have very unhealthy relationship with work. Their identity is all tied up in their role. They don't know who they are without their role. You ask them, what do you do? You know, who are you? They talk about their work. They don't talk about their values. So there's this real identity shift that needs to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with you. You know, Doc, with more people turning to social media, it's everywhere. It's who doesn't have social media? And, you know, some people are using it as advice. You know, they go there and they take information. What would you recommend or have them be mindful of when they log on the social media platforms to receive mental health advice?
Well, you know, I'm a part of this team with the WHO, the World Health Organization, called the FIDES influencers, where we are all people who are licensed. They have to prove your license, they have to vet you and look at all your training. And the reason they recruited us, I felt like I was being recruited to like the MI6 or something, you know, but because it's all international and it's super vetted, and you're like, what is this? But it's really to make sure that you're able to provide information to counter misinformation. There's just so much misinformation out there. And so as a team, you know, we all talk about how to combat misinformation to make sure that the relevant information gets the platform. But it's sad because the misinformation tends to be more fun to watch, right? Like, and
Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with people sharing their stories. I truly believe that when people share their personal stories about their conditions and provide their experiences, it can decrease stigma. And we need people who are not, you know, healthcare professionals to do that. But it becomes very, very dangerous when people start to use their story as the gold standard, which is like, this is what you should do because I did it, you know, because that's just not the case. And as a physician, you know, I've seen so many treatment successes, but I've also seen so many treatments where things didn't turn out the way that neither of us wanted to, right? So I have this knowledge of what's worked, what's not worked, you know, how to be careful in language. You know, there's a reason our brains are worth like $1 million of training, right? Because we have seen so many things. So we're capable of providing information. So what I would tell people is to, if you're looking at a health influencer, you know, go to their wherever their state they're supposedly working out of, and just look it up. It's all public record. See if they're licensed. See if they've had any you know, nicks against their license, because some people have had issues because of medical malpractice, right? And see whether or not they're trained in what you're looking for. Just because someone's a doctor doesn't mean they know, you know, how to treat certain things, right? They may not know certain skin conditions. They may not know certain heart conditions. They may have one tiny role. You know, I often see people who are like GI doctors talking about things that have no business talking about, right? So like, make sure you look them up, and that you're getting reputable information. And if a doctor or a healthcare professional isn't putting a disclaimer like, you know, make sure this is not your medical advice, make sure you talk to someone else, then that's a problem as well. Because, you know, what happens online, it could be good information, but it's not the same thing as treatment.
Yeah.
Good point.
That is an excellent point. And I think it really drives in the fact that you have some of these large voices on this platform. But when you dig deeper, there's no actual interaction or clinical experience or anything like a Google review or health grade or anything to really back who they are that they claim to be with such a huge platform. So thank you for bringing that up.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Now, Dr. Judith, one thing that really struck me about your book is how often people mistake productivity for emotional well-being. I mean, think about it, right? If someone is hitting all their professional goals and managing a social life and keeping up appearances, it's easy to assume they're fine. But what you're saying is that high functioning depression hides behind that illusion of success. So my question is, what are some of the most surprising symptoms of high functioning depression that people tend to overlook?
In my research, because I published the only peer-reviewed clinical study on high functioning depression in the world, in my research, I found that there was a correlation between trauma and HFD. So one of the common trauma responses is avoidance, but not in the classic way that you think of like a combat veteran not wanting to go to a certain area because it triggers them. Avoiding can be busying yourself, you know, jamming your schedule so you don't have to think about anything painful, so you don't have to reflect. And a lot of people, they can't sit still because they're running from something that they haven't processed. And I've seen this in my clinical practice. A lot of people who on the outside look very successful, they come to me and they're like, I have everything. I have the family, I have the home, I have everything, the career. I should be happy, but something's off. And they have anhedonia. They don't enjoy things. And then we work our way back and we find out that there was an unprocessed trauma and they just forgot how to actually tap into joy. They have this different definition. They're chasing this idea of happy, right? I will be happy when I have the house, I have the car, I have the man, I have the family, but they're still not happy. They keep chasing it versus missing out on joy because they're so busy. Joy is the experience in the daily moments. It's
Yeah.
if you're tired, getting rest. If you're hungry, feeling satisfied. If you're lonely, feeling connected, right? If you're uninspired, feeling like motivated. All of those are basic points of joy. And when you add them up, that leads to what in research we call happiness. But most people who come to you in private practice, they're like, I just want to be happy. And we're like, no, we're just trying to get you more points of joy. And another point of joy people neglect is feeling relaxed. On all of our depression research skills, we'll ask, are you soothed? Are you tense? And people get, oh, well, isn't that anxiety? Well, actually being relaxed and not stressed is a point of joy. But many of us are so busy and overwhelmed, we can't access joy because we're so tense. We're so anxious.
Yeah. That's eye-opening because we've been trained to believe that as long as we're getting things done, we must be okay, right? But what you're showing us is that feeling disconnected, emotionally detached, or even just constantly exhausted can be major red flags. And I love how you highlight that these aren't just feelings, they're actual symptoms that deserve attention. That's a really powerful shift in perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, we chase the price tags, but the things that make us really joyful are the things that are priceless, right? The price
Yeah.
tags are the bag, the shoes, which are all nice to have, the home. But at the end of the day, on your deathbed, you're not going to be like, I wish I had another Birkin. You're going to be like, I wish I had 5 minutes with the ones I love. That's what I want to snuggle with. Nobody's going to be snuggling with a Birkin, right?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Doc, what advice do you have for people that feel guilty prioritizing mental health, especially those who believe taking a break means they're failing? I mean, some careers like ours, we are trained and conditioned to think and behave a certain way. And anything out of that perspective, you're perceived as failure or inadequate or incompetent. So, what advice do you have for those?
In our profession, I was an anesthesiologist before I switched to psychiatry. But even in medical school, we are exposed to so much trauma. We see so much death. We see so much pain. But no one pulls us aside and says, oh, how are you doing? Like, take some time to process it. It's like, okay, what did you learn from that case? What did you do wrong? What did you do right? And sometimes you're actually shamed, if you don't know what to do, if you have no answers, if you're still like, in fight or flight from what you just saw, right? You're seen as weak. So we have this very military type training in our approach to patient care. And many of us, the healers, are unhealed. And one of the symptoms of trauma is actually internalizing blame and shame. When I do my PTSD studies, my post traumatic stress disorder studies, there are 30 plus symptoms of trauma, but most general people don't know that. And one of the symptoms is shame, blame, feeling not good enough, feeling unworthy. So if we have this unprocessed trauma, no wonder healthcare professionals are running around like a chicken with their head cut off, right? Constantly taking shifts, constantly doing this and that, not eating, not taking care of themselves. Doctors are the worst patients. They don't have good health, right? Because of that, I don't feel worthy, because they don't feel as if they should slow down, because they feel guilty if they actually think about themselves before a patient, right? So the healers are unhealed. And that's why I wrote this book, because when you go to your doctor and you just ask them about your symptoms of depression and you're not functioning, they're going to help you. But if they ask you, are you functioning? They're going to say, well, come back when you've broken down. And that is a broken model, right? Because a lot of the healers are having these symptoms and they're over functioning. So they don't see it as a problem, because that would be admitting to themselves that they have a problem, right? They don't want to diagnose something that they see in themselves. So we need to change the way we approach mental health. There's a longevity boom now. We don't say, wait till the cancer's at stage 4. We say, catch it before it even starts. We don't say, wait till you have a full-blown heart attack. We say, no, prevent heart disease. We need to do the same for mental health. Let's prevent high-functioning people from breaking down.
Wow.
So, Dr. Judith, well, you're a very high accomplished physician and your accolade is impeccable. And one thing about the Polished Beauty podcast, the tagline is where ambition meets empowerment. So you're clearly both of them. I want to know if there's one thing, that one bold moment or situation that has led you to be here, what would it be to give our audience?
Well, I had this moment at my desk in 2020. I was just inducted into this elite Ivy League board of women, and I was the youngest member of the board. And then at that time, my lab was flourishing. I own my own lab in Midtown, have 10 women scientists under me. So like things look really great. Um, and then I had this cute little kid at home, the perfect doctor husband, but people had no idea I was struggling. Like my whole personal life was falling apart. And I just remember sitting at the desk, giving this talk to this large healthcare system, and just halfway through being like, oh my God, I think I'm depressed. Like, how did this happen? It just snuck up on me. And I was experiencing anhedonia. And I thought, I study anhedonia and depression for a living. Like, how did this happen? But then I thought, well, there must be so many other people like me who just don't even know what it is, and it sneaks up on them. So I want people to know what it is so they don't feel surprised when they wake up one day and they're like, why do I feel this way? That they have the term, that they understand that there are ways to cope, that this is not just being a human. Human beings were built with the DNA for joy. We have it built literally into our DNA, right? Like, so that's why we have dopamine. And that's why I developed the 5 Vs, because most of us have 5 fingers. And I want you to know that when you validate how you feel and you accept it and you vet and express it, and you tap into values that bring you meaning and purpose, and you take care of your body with your vitals, and you plan joy in the future with your vision, you can hold on and reclaim that joy, because joy is our birthright. We have it. We just don't know how to access it.
Wow. Joy is our birthright. I love that. That's it. I'm signing that. Joy is my birthright.
Yes, that's your answer to saying no to when people ask you about crossing your boundaries. I'm sorry. Joy is my birthright, honey. I can't do that right now.
That's right.
Well, what an enlightening and empowering segment. That was great. For anyone listening and watching, you can grab your copy of High Functioning, Overcome Your Hidden Depression and Reclaim Your Joy. It was out April 8th, but it's directly available on the website at highfunctioningbook.com, or you can also head to drjudithjoseph.com, and do check her out on the gram at Dr. Judith Joseph.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you for listening. Video recording of this episode will be featured on our YouTube channel, Dr. Daisy Ayim. We are also found on Instagram at Polished Beauty Podcast or at Dr. Daisy Ayim. Remember, new episode drop every Wednesday, so stay tuned. Please like, share, follow.